All right, welcome back. I've wanted to talk about this for a while, so I'm just going to do it. But first, got my Locos hat on because it's kind of just insane. I also got my Seattle Kraken jersey on. Matty Beniers, show him some love. Massachusetts boy, in all. So everybody complains about the overtime system, the 5 minute 3-on-3, and how teams will cycle with pucks, and some of them can be real boring as it's evolved in the league, which is fair. Some of them are exciting, some of them are boring, and then a lot of people don't really care for the shootouts and all that. I'll be on the record and I'll say it is what it is. This has been the format for a few years, and teams should prepare for this type of overtime. Every team goes into overtime at some point throughout the season, some more than others, but nonetheless, everybody plays overtime. You should be prepared to have players that are capable of playing 3-on-3, and you should have players that are capable of scoring in the shootout. We've seen some teams plan for this, and we've seen some teams kind of put that to the wayside. It is what it is. But I personally I feel like that's not a great way to justify a regulation win by winning like in a shootout, for example. I'm not too mad about it anymore. It takes a few years where every team like understands which players are good at shootouts and have higher scoring percentages and all that, and you acquire them to help you in the shootout, to help you get that extra point from overtime and so on. But I kind of want to change it up. As much as I enjoy the shootout, I don't really care for the 3-on-3 overtime. It was kind of exciting when it first started, but that's kind of died down in my opinion. At least for my personal dopamine hit, not quite what it was when it first started. So this is personally what I like to see. This is what I propose. And I know everybody is not going to be happy with it, and that's okay because this is fun in little fantasy land. This isn't I haven't heard talks of this happening or anything close to this resembling a future change. But in my fantasy world, this is what I would personally like to see and how points would be distributed and what the overtime system looks like. So I'm going to start off by saying a 3-point system. Yes, point totals will be increased slightly. Not more than you think. You're not going to get like 170 point teams. You're not going to get 1.5 times the current point status of the standings. I think was it the Rangers had, or the Stars had 113 points this last year. You're not going to with this system. You're not going to see them at like 165 points next year. So because you get the 3 points for regulation win, but we'll talk about where else you lose points. So to start off, the structure. You got 3 20-minute periods, standard. That is what it is. That's regulation. That's the end of regulation. And you do 1 20-minute overtime period. Okay? You get 3 points for a regulation win, and you get 1 point if it's tied after overtime. If you win it in the overtime period, you get 2 points. Okay? 3 points for getting a win within the first 60 minutes. 2 points for needing an extra minute to 20 minutes to score a goal. You finish the game, each team is tied 1 point apiece. You finish the game, and that's it. You lose the game at any point in overtime, in regulation, you get 0 points. So this is gonna, teams that get overtime losses, and I think this is partially because it's a 3-on-3 rather than a 5-on-5. It can be more of a skills competition, and the shootout is a little more of a skills competition. There's almost like it's almost justified. Like, hey, here's a point because this wasn't like super normal hockey. This is a little odd. You don't see this often at all. So like I get the whole 2 and 1 point system now, but I think it kind of inflates some teams in terms of how well they are. And I'll be the first to say I'm a Boston Bruins fan, and the Bruins benefited greatly from the overtime losses this year. We'll dive into that. But essentially, right, so regulation wins only 3 points, overtime win 2 points, tie game at the end 1 point, 0 points for any loss, any type of loss. There's no shootouts, there's no 3-on-3. I don't even want to see 4-on-4. What I think this will do, because the tie game point is 2 point, you need 3 tie games to total a regulation win. So it kind of separates those teams that are able to finish from those teams that can finish. Right? So you need 3 ties to get a regulation win. I think this will incentivize teams to pull the goaltender or do some funky things. Pull the goaltender with a couple minutes left in regulation. Like, you got a power play to finish the third period. Pull your goaltender, have a 6-on-4, get a better scoring opportunity. We could see this, like, struggle in the last few minutes of an overtime, too. Every team vying for that last overtime win point. We could see pulled goaltenders. We could see weird schemes. It's not going to be as defensive hockey. I think you'll see some more rush chances, some more defenders jumping up in the offensive zone and try to generate offense for their team, leaving them liable in the back. So if a goal's not scored, the other team rushes up the ice and their defender can jump in. You can have some really good back and forth 5-on-5 play. The one caveat I have with this is you gotta limit the penalty calls. And this is my ideal world. I don't like all the penalty calls that are called throughout a regular season game. I think it's a lot. I think a lot of them are questionable and unnecessary. And I'm not pointing out any specific team. It's been pretty even across the board on which teams get kind of questionable calls. You know, I'm there was a Bruins game this year. They were playing the Montreal Canadiens. I'm a Bruins fan. And the Canadiens got like 3 or 4 pretty questionable calls throughout the game that the Bruins were not getting called for. And, you know, in prior years, like the year prior, we saw the complete opposite. We saw the Bruins get those questionable calls against the Canadiens, and the Canadiens were doing the same thing but weren't getting called for. So, you know, you need to kind of figure out the reffing. I don't want to see an overtime game be a back and forth with penalties. I don't want one team to be on the power play and then the next team to be on. I just want 5-on-5 good hockey. I want the best team to win, right? And you know, that's just my personal take on it. But we're moving on. So how would this work? Regulation wins. So I have division leaders and the Winnipeg Jets up here. The Florida Panthers, 52 wins on the year. 10 of them came in extra time or shootout. They only had 42 regulation wins. Going down, so that would be only 42 wins that would get 3 points rather than 52. For example, Rangers, 55 wins, 43 in regulation. So that's 12. That's a difference of 12. It's not nothing. You know, Stars, 52 wins, 40 regulation wins, difference of 12. Jets, 52 wins, same as the Stars. Remember, the Stars won the division by 3 points over the Jets. 52 wins, 46 regulation wins. That's 6 more regulation wins than the Stars. So you're talking about a good point differential there. I'm not saying the Jets are better than the Stars. That's just how this would work out, and I kind of thought it'd be a little fun to put it on the board. It was interesting. You know, the Jets were a better regulation team than the Stars throughout the year, and for various reasons, it is what it is. Regular season's done, whatever. It's not really a debate at this point, but then you have the Canucks, 50 wins, 44 regulation wins. So it would jumble up the standings a little bit. Not a whole lot. You still get the best teams being on top of the leaderboard, but those regulation wins hold more value. Those overtime wins hold some value. But a tie or an overtime loss, you know, you got to win the game, right? So going back to overtime loss points, the top 3 teams in the league for overtime losses, which gain you a point in a 2-point system, that's half a win essentially. The Islanders and Montreal Canadiens with 16 overtime losses, that's 16 additional points added to their overall point standings in the league. And the Boston Bruins with 15 overtime losses, 15 additional points. On the low end, the two lowest were tied with 4. The Ottawa Senators and New York Rangers only had 4 overtime losses. There were a bunch of teams with 5 overtime losses. But this is just my ideal world. You know, I like to see 5-on-5 hockey. I like to see even strength hockey. I like to see the best team win type thing. And there's a whole debate for the penalty calls, and you can have that debate. I get both sides of it. I lean a little more towards one side than the other, but that's just opinion. That's, you know, whatever, man. But yeah, so this is what I'd like to see. if you have a different idea, different opinion, personally, the 4-on-4 overtime, I could do without. I'd rather it be even strength. Because then it's not really conventional, and some teams have advantages, right? If you have McDavid and Draisaitl out as your two, what's it called, two forwards, and then you have Ekholm and Bouchard on the blue line for the Edmonton Oilers, and you're going up a team like, I don't know, that's tough to match up against. You have an elite defensive defenseman, elite offensive defenseman, and two of the best offensive players in the league. Right? So I don't know. I think some teams get an advantage. I'd rather see 5-on-5, even play hockey. That's what you build a team for. That's what you build the lines for. I'd like to see that happen. So, I personally not the biggest fan of a 4-on-4 overtime. I know McDavid recommended that. It would also help his team quite a bit, which is fine. It's not a bad idea. But if you do this, you do one overtime period. You have to figure out the point structure, right? Because what's going to stop teams from just going into overtime so every team's guaranteed a point? Kind of like now. We see a lot of teams kind of stay back and play defensive hockey when it's a tie game late in the third period rather than going for the regulation win. It's not uncommon. I've seen almost every team do it throughout this year. It is what it is. Those last few minutes of the hockey game and a tie game should be the most exciting, not the most boring. So I'm not a big fan of just giving out points if you finish regulation and the game's tied and you still lose. I don't know. Even getting rid of the overtime point, I'd be okay with. But again, it's that 5-on-5 versus the 3-on-3. You don't build your team to be a 3-on-3 style of team. I think it takes a lot of time in practice to really get that down, especially new up-and-coming players that haven't played in a 3-on-3 system in a while. That's a whole nother facet, or maybe even ever. It's a whole nother facet of their game they need to learn and figure out. We saw Matt Boldy in overtime, 3-on-3 overtime. I forget who it was against. But he takes a shot and then peels out in front of the goaltender, goes along to the boards. But there was a nice juicy rebound where if he just stopped, he could have potted it for for the game-winning goal. Instead, the defense picked up that rebound and ran back, scored the game-winning goal for the other team. Matt Boldy, young player, wow, I'm struggling to find this word. Remembering that you're not going to have another guy tailing you to get that rebound on a breakaway, can be tough, right? To know you're probably not going to get decked on a 3-on-3 on a breakaway if you stop in front of the goaltender, whereas you might if it's a 5-on-5 game. So that's my take. Let me know what you think. You agree? You disagree? What would you do? Do you like this? Would you do something else? Would you modify a 3-point system? Are you into a 3-point system? I was a little hesitant at first, but I also hate the 2-point system. So I appreciate you guys. Let me know. Take care, right?